Hi guys, okay, here we go. You asked me to do it, so here it is. My first ever video about Darktable. Yes. Now, I learned quite a bit about Darktable off Bruce Williams, and I don't think Bruce would be very impressed with this video if he saw it. But, you know, a picture speaks 1,000 words, doesn't it? And there's another guy on YouTube, Aurelian Pierre, and from what I can gather, Aurelian is the big guy at Darktable, and he will probably loathe and detest this video as well because of what I'm going to do to create this finished image. And don't get me wrong, I'm not putting this forward as a teaching video. Yes, I could teach Lightroom till the cows come home, because I've been using Lightroom since before it was called Lightroom. I can teach you Photoshop till the cows come home because I've been using Photoshop since before it was called Photoshop. I can teach you Raw Therapy because I've been using it extensively since version 5.4, and I've been using Darktable now for, is it 5 weeks? So in that case, with regard to Darktable, I could hardly call myself barely knowledgeable. Now, a lot of people have asked me, Andy, why are you bothering with Darktable? And hopefully this video is going to sort of show you why, because some of the things you can do in Darktable really do excite me. Those of you that know Darktable know that this symbol here, or this group here of modules, is the active modules. And you can see I've got 5 graduated density filters in operation on this, and I've got the Sigmoid module and the Filmic module, which is probably going to be frowned upon by a lot of people, but I don't care. And really and truly, it's immaterial, because if you look at the quality of the image at 100%, it's sharp, it's got no sharpening halos on it. It could be sharper, but I would do my final polish and sharpen inside of Photoshop. GIMP users would do it inside of GIMP. And so basically I always regard a raw processor as something which is actually preparing my photographs for final touch-ups and in the form of sharpening and localized dodging and burning. So there we go. Now then, I am so unconfident with Darktable that I'm probably going to screw this up in a moment, but if I take a snapshot and I go back to my original, let's go back to this snapshot again, there we go, I'll get this little tag here, and if I slide this across you can see the image we start off with. Now this is part of an exposure blend, and I've shot this exposure blend by bracketing the ISO, starting at about 1/3 of a stop over base, going all the way down to L1 in 1/3 stop increment, which just basically keeps shortening the result of the exposure so it can capture these highlights, but still keeping that same 15-second f14 exposure value. So there you go. But you know, I mean, Jesus, you shouldn't be able to get that from that. You shouldn't, not really. And yeah, I mean, you just would never manage this in Lightroom and still have the same amount of image quality. Don't get me wrong, I'm not bagging Lightroom. All I'm bagging when I complain about Lightroom is the develop module. You cannot beat Lightroom for anything other than the develop module, and the develop module is flawed and has been for years, and I've been complaining about it for years. But anyway, you guys are tuning into this video because you want to see how on earth I've got this from this, correct? Okay, right, well, just to save any problems, I'm going to go back to Darktable and there's the thumbnail of the image, and I'm just going to go to, where do we need to go to? Discard history. So I'm going to throw the history away, and that's probably going to screw everything up. And then what we're going to do is double tap the image and take it back into the darkroom view, and I don't need that snapshot, so we'll get rid of it. Okay, so here we are, and this is the raw file brought straight into Darktable with Darktable's default settings. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is basically go and make a Darktable equivalent of my mybase.pp3 file, which neutralizes the image inside of raw therapy and puts on sort of a bit of noise reduction, etc, etc. So I've already got that made. So if I go and click my base by clicking this little icon here, and there we go. So now fundamentally I'm looking at the raw file, and the changes that have been made, we've got output color profile, which is normally set by default to perceptual, and I've got it set to relative colorimetric. The export profile is by default set to sRGB web safe. I've switched that out to ProPhoto. For an input color profile, I've left that at standard color matrix, and I kept thinking this was some sort of mystery meat until yesterday when I actually found out what it is. Ha! It's actually, they've nicked it off Adobe. Yeah, it's actually the Adobe standard color profile, or camera profile, or input profile. And yeah, there you go. That's what that is. So I'm quite happy to run with that. I've switched the working profile from, I can't remember whether it's Linear Rec 709 or Linear Rec 2020. Why it's set to that for default, I have no idea, because Rec 709 is basically sRGB, and Rec 2020 is a bit bigger than Adobe RGB, but considerably smaller than ProPhoto. And the working profile in Lightroom and Camera Raw is ProPhoto, and you can't change it. And the working profile in Raw Therapy is ProPhoto. And so there we go. Chromatic aberrations, I've included that, and that's just set to its default. And we've got profile denoise, that's set to its default. We'll be coming back to that shortly. And demosaicing, I've switched from the default, which I think is RCD, to RCD plus VNG4. Highlight reconstruction is just left at default, and white balance is left at default, as are the raw black and white points. Okie dokie. Fundamentally, all you do is basically come up there, create a new style, call it my base, and you can afford to just go select all, I think, and then just go and save it, and you'll be away. But I'm not going to bother because I've already got that done. And when it comes to these ProPhoto inclusions, they don't come shipped as standard with Darktable. You have to go and download them, and then you have to put them in a folder, which is, where are we? Whoops a daisy. Come to in, and then we go to here. So in your user account on your computer, you will have a config Darktable color. Okay, and if you go there, you need to put that ProPhoto profile. I've showed you before where to download that from. I'll put a link in the video. I showed you that when I showed you how to make the mybase.pp3 for raw therapy. And you just put it in the in folder and put it in the out folder if you want to maintain a ProPhoto workflow in a 16-bit TIFF export. Okay, and you also have to remember that unlike raw therapy, Darktable will not interface with Photoshop, which is a bit of a mistake. I have seen on the internet that you can actually get a Lua script that you can introduce into Darktable that will allow you to send an image directly to Photoshop, but I haven't tried that yet, so there you go. And that all sounds way too complicated for me. But anyway, right, so let's get on with processing this image. So what I'm going to do, I've got my favourites here with my favourite modules, and the first thing I'm going to do is turn on Filmic. Now when I turn on Filmic, it's going to go horrible. Yeah, it's going to go super contrasty. Now the thing about the Filmic module, from what I can see, is first off, you need to have this top middle grey luminance slider available to you, and if you can't see that, go into options and you might see that that is unchecked. Use custom middle grey values. Make sure you check that and then come back to scene. Okay, so what do we need to do here? The first thing you'll notice is down in the shadow end, this is your shadows, this is your highlights, this is your middle grey. Okay, so you do not want to see any orange bits anywhere, and in an ideal situation you want this black point down here. Okay, this is not going to be a perfect situation because obviously the image is underexposed, you know, for whatever reason. I mean, it's deliberately underexposed here, but just in case you've made a foobar yourself on an exposure, you've just seen how much we can rescue it. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the middle grey slider and I'm going to move it over to the left, because what I'm doing is I'm increasing the contrast on this. This curve looks very much like, or did do before I changed it, looked very much like the curve that we used to get on the spec sheets for a, say, Ilford FP4 sheet film or whatever. This part of the curve will be known as the SLP, or the straight line portion. Yeah, and what we're trying to do is manipulate the contrast curve of this image with Filmic to get as steep a straight line portion and as progressive a curve, S-shaped curve as possible, without orange bits coming in either the top or the bottom. So the quickest way on this particular image to get started on that is to move the dynamic range scaling slider over towards the left. You see, we're starting to throw quite a lot of exposure into this image. Now if I change the middle grey to go more to the left, you can see how much exposure we are actually putting in that image. Now we've got no orange at the top in the highlights, but we've got some orange, and this orange is basically clipping, as far as I can gather, and it's on, well, in the shadow area. So what we need to do is we need to flatten off that shadow area. And so if we move the shadow slider to the right, okay, bit like that, that's looking quite good. The only thing is, we could really do with this mid-tone about here, but there's nothing we can do about that, because fundamentally this shot is not correctly exposed. If it was a correctly exposed shot, that orange would be more like up here. If you take this rectangle here that you can just about see, so it's sort of 3 along and 1 down from the top, if you were to split that into 4 vertically and horizontally, in a well shot image, this mid grey point here needs to be somewhere in this top right hand quadrant of this particular rectangle. But this shot is about a stop underexposed, maybe a little bit more, and so, well, for the foreground it is anyway. And so fundamentally, this is why this dot is down here. And I don't really want to make any more changes to it because I'm actually going to linearize the curve, which, you know, might be a good thing, might be a bad thing, but I'm just going to sort of leave it with a bit of an S-shaped curve in it, somewhat like that. Okie dokie. Now what I'm going to do is click on Sigmoid, and this is another thing I like, which doesn't happen in raw therapy. When you've got your module stack, when you click on one, the previous one you opened closes. I really like that. That's quite nice. So we're going to go to Sigmoid, and I'm going to just turn it on. Okay. Now you can see that has thrown a boatload of contrast into the foreground. Has it done a lot to the sky? It's done a bit to the sky, not a lot, but I do like what it's done, but it's done it a little bit too much. So I'm going to sort of turn down the contrast a little bit, and I might skew the adjustment and make it go a little bit lighter, rather like that. Okay, and then we are going to come into the image at 100%, and let's just have a look at those shadows. You see, now if we'd done this in Lightroom, there will be an absolute boatload of noise in here, and this stuff in Darktable does fascinate me. I mean, we could have just about got to this point inside of raw therapy as well, but we're going to get really creative in a moment with Darktable, and for the moment I'm just going to hide or collapse the Sigmoid module, and I'm just going to come to this little light bulb button down here. I love this because it does that. It doesn't throw a great big white background against the image, which you can do in the likes of Lightroom, you can do in the likes of raw therapy. I just like having this border around the image because it does fundamentally the same thing. It shows you the real contrast in the image by having this white border around. It would show you exactly the same if the white covered the entire workspace of the GUI, but then it becomes painful to look at if you're staring at it for more than 5 minutes. This little white edge around here is fabulous, and it's not just white. If you actually hover over it, and there you go, it's the ISO 12646 colour assessment conditions. Alrighty, so bear that in mind. And yeah, so let's get on. Now, the one thing I do really love, well, there's two things I really love about Darktable, and if we go and pick a module, I'm going to actually, I've got the graduated density here, I'm actually going to hit graduated density, and now you can see I've darkened the sky. Now, there's two things about most of the modules. If we come to this first icon here, we can generate a new instance of this module. And that means we can have multiple graduated density filters. That comes in massively useful. I can't stress how useful that is. Yes, we can create multiple graduated filters in Lightroom and Camera Raw. But then again, we can't put drawn or parametric masks on them. Not really. I mean, we can now put parametric masks on in Lightroom. You know, we can use select subject or select sky, which I suppose would constitute a drawn mask, but we can't use a customized drawn mask. And of course, what we can do also is in this module here, or masking module here, we can use multiples or combinations of drawn and parametric masks, which is really powerful stuff. And so there we go. Anyway, right, let's just crack on with this. So the graduated density filters take a bit of getting used to. They're not as straightforward as they are in, say, the likes of raw therapy. That one is really super straightforward. Its only problem is you can only use it once. You can't have multiple instances of anything inside raw therapy, which is a big, big winner for Darktable. So what have we done? We're actually darkening off the sky, okay? And it's got a very, very, very long graduation on it. Now, the other thing is, you'll notice we've got these little white triangles at the ends. The way a lot of people explain these graduated filters is, oh, well, the graduated filters pointing towards the lighter end of the graduation. Yeah, might be. But if that's true, you would expect that you'd be able to flip this and make it go dark at the bottom and light at the top. Now, it doesn't quite work that way. If we have a positive value, you don't get this mixed up. You see, it says plus 3 EV. We've not added plus 3 EV. Otherwise, this sky would have gone massively light. This is like we've been out and bought a plus 3 neutral density filter. All right. So it's actually knocked 3 stops or 3.5 stops off the relative exposure of the top of the image. And so it can get a bit confusing. But if we make things darker, all right, they go darker at the top of the image. But if we make things lighter, see, if we were doing this in raw therapy, we would have to flip the image around. You see, once it's worked it out, it's the bottom of the image which goes lighter. So when you're trying to make a inverse, if you like, graduated density filter, these arrows will still point to the lightest part of the filter. All right, so don't think you've got to go and do 180 degrees rotation to do this, because you haven't. And if you double click that, it'll go back to where it was. All right, so we've added a neutral density filter. What's that done? It's darkened the sky somewhat, but it's actually darkened a little bit of the foreground. So what I might do is just increase the hardness of that graduation up and just keep it off quite a lot of this foreground here. Now then, what else can we do? We can actually now go and create a new instance of that graduated filter. And so there we go, there's the new instance. Why I get this black line up here sometimes, I don't know. But what I'm now going to do is lighten the foreground. Not that much, Andy. Grow up. Alright, so I'm just going to lighten the foreground to where I want it to be lightened. And I'm going to increase the hardness of the grad. See, now if I take that hardness all the way, you can see we're doing a lot of lightening on the foreground and nothing on the sky. Nothing to speak of. Let's just turn that off. Not a lot to speak of. We can harden it up a little bit more if we want to. But now the foreground is too light. So what we're going to do is turn that down. But here's the other nice thing and really useful thing. We can actually add a tint to this to generate a colour difference between the foreground and the background. So I'm just going to go and move the hue over to a sort of orangey yellow, and then we're going to lift the saturation of the image. Okay, and there we go. So now we've got a warmer foreground and a cooler sky, and it's sort of dropping off a little bit too sharply. So what I'm going to do is bring that graduation down a little bit and probably leave it about there. So we fundamentally made a big difference to the foreground of that image. Now then, what have we done to the noise in the shadows? Let's just use the scroll wheel on the mouse to scroll up and scroll in, and we'll just move it a little bit. Come on. Doesn't want to move. Right, so we'll just go there. That's it. So there we go. So now we can see the amount of noise we've generated. Alrighty, so let's quit that graduated density filter, and we're now going to come to profiled denoise. Okay, now I'm not going to bother making any adjustments here, any of these zone adjustments. Just leave it as it is, because I want to try and keep it really super simple, and just leave this default white balance adaptive transform on. I'm not going to comment on that because I don't blooming understand it. But if you just come to these two sliders here, you'll notice this one says preserve shadows. Now if I go and wang that preserve shadows, oh dear, yes, now we can see what's actually going on. And honestly, this has got to be the best noise reduction I've seen, but the basic noise reduction I've seen in a raw processor. Why the likes of Lightroom can't have this degree of accuracy with noise reduction for all the money they've got and the amount of money they earn every goddamn day through subscriptions, I don't know. But obviously we've got too much noise reduction going on in the shadows, and so I'm just going to bring the preserved shadows up and probably bring it up to about 0.5. Let's take it to 0.5, 0.51. That's looking really good. But you see, now what we can do, if I go and put on a parametric mask, okay, and we hit the mask, we can see that that noise reduction is actually taking place across all the image. I don't want it across all the image. So working on the parametric mask grey channel, yeah, sliders for grey value, I'm going to come to this slider and I'm going to grab the bottom one and we're going to slide it all the way to the left, or nearly all the way to the left. And you can just start to see we're getting some black bits in here. So this is where it can get a bit fiddly. If we just grab that panel and stretch it out as much as we can, and then we're just going to have to scroll down a bit. Now you can see how much gap we've got in these input sliders. So I'm just going to slide it down even more, and then suddenly it'll jump, and we might even be able to expand that gap between those two sliders a little bit more. And let's just see what we're at. We're on 0.78. I know it will go lower than that. So what we'll do is just try and move it a little bit further. There we go. 0.39. Yes. And let's just take that feathery one over there. And look at that for a noise reduction mask. Let's squeeze this back where it needs to be. I'm quite impressed with that for a mask. Whoa, I don't need it squeezing back that much. Can't see what I'm doing. Let's come back over here. And there we go. We'll leave it there. And so if I turn off the mask, now look at that for noise reduction. And everywhere where it's black, we're not getting any noise reduction. Let's just remind ourselves what that mask looks like again. And there we go. So we're only getting noise reduction in the very darkest parts of the image. So I'm quite liking that. Oh, it's really good. And, you know, I mean, the Lightroom boys, they ought to take a look at this. They really should. And just see where they're going wrong, because we've got this level of simple noise reduction in a raw processor that costs us nothing. Raw Therapy could do with looking at this, but then again, the Raw Therapy developers aren't paid for the work that they do, and you don't have to pay for Raw Therapy either. And it is still a very, very useful piece of kit to do. And I, right at this minute, I will still use raw therapy if I think I can get away with it. But anyway, there we go. Noise reduction 101. It looks good. If it looks good, then guess what? It is good. So I'm going to close down Denoise, and then I'm going to come over to details, and we're just going to hit sharpen. Okay, because I can't work out if this is sort of post-process USM sharpening or if it's supposed to be capture sharpening. I'm not 100% sure. But looking here, that is good for a level of what I might call input sharpening. It's good for archival storage, or so you'd think. This is not the place to view that level of sharpening. A better place will be here, and because we've got a high contrast boundary. Now, if I try and zoom in with the mouse wheel, more than 100% I can't. But if I hold is it the shift key? No. Is it the control key? Yeah, we can go in much more, so we don't have to come over here to get up to 400%. I've got a little bit of a halo there, so I might just... Would have dropped my radius? No. I'm not going to change. In fact, I am going to change. I'm going to increase the amount of sharpening slightly. Okay, rather like that. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up a parametric mask again, and I'm just going to pull it down off the highlights a couple of points, down to about 98, and then fade that sharpening off, and I'm just going to pull it a couple of points out the black. Okay, so we've gone, if you notice here, we're at 0, and we're fading in at 2 because this one's been moved up a little bit. So I might just bring that up to sort of 1 and fade out to sort of 3 or 4 like that. Okay, so now we can turn that sharpening off and we can turn it back on again. And now I might pull the radius down just a little smidge, and I might pull the amount back down a little tiny bit. Okay, so I'm now at 400%, and if I try very, very hard, I can see the beginnings of a halo, but that really, really wouldn't worry me one iota. We'll just go back to a 100% view, and there we go. Yeah, and there's capture sharpening. I don't think that's too bad. I might err on the side of caution and just bring that amount slider a little bit further down. And there we go, plenty sharp enough. Let's go and check the other eye contrast boundary, which would be over there. And yeah, that skyline is looking absolutely perfect. So what we're going to do now is come back out to a fit to screen view. And so what have we got? We've got our sharpening deployed that we want. We've got our noise reduction deployed that we want. Tell you what, let's go real creative, and let's come back over here. Let's close the sharpening module down, and we've now got 2 graduated density filters. Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to go new instance. Yes, I am. Let's have a look at that. That's not looking too bad. I might actually bring the hardness of that up a little bit, and yeah, I don't think that's looking too bad. What's it done? Yeah, just added a bit more darkness to the sky, so that's pushed the distance, the middle and far distant horizon, back relative to our foreground just a little bit more. We've still got a warmish foreground leading to a coolish background, and I think what we're going to do last of all is to come and activate, just go and activate, bang, local contrast. Now, I mean, come on, you know, I mean, I haven't used as many neutral density filters or graduated density filters as I did do before. Let's come back And let's go and throw another one on. And shut that one down. And shut the panel down. And then just go and add another one. New instance. Yeah, like that. But I might just lift that up a smidge. Yeah. Just to save darkening down these two headlands. And I tell you what, let's go stupid. New instance. Yes. Power! Yeah, like that. Okay. Right, so there we go. Let's close that panel down for that graduated density filter. And there is our finished image. Yes. What do you think about that, guys and girls? It impresses the bejesus out of me. We couldn't do all of that in raw therapy, not by any stretch of the imagination, because first off, we couldn't have these multiple instances of graduated filters. A lot of people are led down the garden path with regard to graduated density filters, and as if they're not important, they actually represent one of the most important, but equally the most simple processing adjustment that you can make to your images by just sort of adding or subtracting depth from the image. And yeah, so there you go, guys and girls. Hope you found that useful. Hope you found it interesting. Andy's first venture into a YouTube video featuring Darktable. All right, guys, until next time, stay safe, stay well, keep taking the pictures. Don't forget, if you want to support the channel, click the super thanks button. That would be greatly appreciated. But then again, you can just like the video, leave a nice comment, share it with your friends. And don't forget, over on my Patreon channel, we've now got, I think it's 175 members only posts over there. So you know, if you want to go and subscribe to Patreon, don't let me stop you. Yeah. I could use the rhino, boys and girls. I really could. All right, guys and girls, stay safe, stay well, keep taking the pictures, and until the next time, tooroo.